Hello, guys and gals, and this is part 16 of our reading of Guinevere by Sharan Newman. And as always, we're going to go over the copyright information. This is copyright 1981 by Sharan Newman, and I have the author's written consent to read this book on my YouTube channel. Now, I also have to bring up that this book is still for sale in bookstores, along with the second book in the trilogy, The Chessboard Queen, and the third book of the trilogy, Guinevere Evermore. Now, in the last part, Guinevere and Alswitha became very good friends. Ecgfrith found a way to get to the beach, and he wants to swim and go warn his father because he's found a way to beat Arthur. Guinevere saw Gawain and her maid Risa in an intimate act, so it kind of traumatized her. Anyways, let's continue on then. Where were we? Here. Come with me, dear. Have a cup of wine here in the corner, and then go change your robe. You needn't be embarrassed. I don't believe they saw you. That wasn't the real problem. He knew, but it was beyond him to give advice on such matters. Better leave that to Sidra or Gwynlyn. That was their job. He calmed her down, and when she was sure Gawain was well away, she went back up. Risa was still there, belting her robe. Her hair needed combing. She was humming when she saw Guinevere. He gave her a radiant, secret smile. You were right. I can't believe it. I never met a man before who lived up to his own boasting. If only she stopped noticing the look of distaste Guinevere had given her. I know it's not what you would do, she defended herself. You can't. Someday your family will expect you to marry someone important, to make an alliance. You can't just have a man any time you want him, but it's different with me. My father is just a small farmer, hardly more than a bondman. If I brought home a lord's child, he wouldn't care. Another mouth to feed means another person to help with the work. You might even think of it. You might think of it an honor. I have no great connection that would make me appealing as a bride, and I certainly have no interest in those rough-fingered workmen more suited to my station. I'm happy Gawain is happy. Don't scold me with your eyes. I can't stand it. Guinevere closed her offending eyes and sat down on the bed. I didn't mean to. I don't blame you at all. It just makes me uncomfortable. I wish you wouldn't speak of it. Risa shrugged. If you wish, but her tone was more of pity than of shame. This event, more than any other, typified the reason Guinevere was often discomforted at Cador. It wasn't just the shock of watching others engaging in what should be private activities, but the constant necessity of being around other people and having to deal with their emotions and desires. However she might try to avoid them, strong feelings frightened her. At the villa, there had always been a way to shield herself from the others, a room to go to, a clearing in the forest. She could lie in the bath for hours and hear nothing but the rustle of water. Loud voices, rude noises were not allowed in a cultured household. In Cador's castle, they echoed off the bare stone walls and rang through the corridors. Even in the middle of the night, there was always the sound of the watchmen calling to each other, dogs howling, clanks and grindings, and that seemed to come from the earth and rocks themselves. They battered at her constantly until she felt her very soul was bruised. Early the next day, before the dawn had dispelled the gray crust of fog, Guinevere gratefully buried her face in the cool silver of the unicorn's mane. We must go home, she whimpered. I am so lonely for you here. Would you not like to live in the forest again? She felt the soft rumble of disquiet in his midst. He pawed the sand with a cloven hoof. I do not see myself returning there, he sighed at last. I believe I would be happy to lie in the grass and the flowers again, but I do not think it will be. Guinevere did not wish to question him about this. It was too ominous a warning. If she didn't hear it, it might not happen. She gently stroked his back. Okay. You have not found the others yet. No, but I have found my answer. There are no others. I do not know what voices call to me, but they were not what they claimed. I am the unicorn. Whatever that should be, I must somehow discover for myself. I begin to believe that the answer does not lie in this life. Guinevere clutched his neck and forced his eyes to hers. We have spoken of this before. You mustn't leave me. His tears spilled over her hand, so hot that they left red streaks as they fell, but she would not release him. You are all that keeps me from despair in this miserable place, all I have ever wanted in my life. If you die, I promise to accompany you. No, you are not allowed to do that. He paused, confused. I do not understand why humans are still the most mysterious of creatures to me, but that is not the way you are allowed to follow. If I do not die, there will never be another unicorn. I will be eternal, but eternally alone. Perhaps in this place we call death I will find what I seek. But it is different for you. I sense somehow that by my presence I am keeping you from being truly human. Do not cry, my other self. I will not leave yet, and you will know when and why I do. Perhaps it will not be what either of us imagines. That had to be Guinevere's comfort. A few days later, she asked Sidra if she could go home for a few weeks. At this time of the year, it's hardly safe. The seas are clear now, and if the Saxons bring new armies now is when they will come. The road between here and your home is right in the path from the sea to the Saxon-held lands. Please, Sidra, I'm so homesick. I cannot bear it any longer. There are over a dozen men here who are going that way soon to join Lord Cador and Arthur. Couldn't I travel with them? That would be safe, like having my own army. I'm sure they would be willing to take a short detour and stay a night with my parents before they face the wars. Sidra, I must go home for a while. Sidra gave in. I see that, she said. I do not approve for many reasons, but it is clear to me that you need to be away from us for a time. You last almost a year this visit. Perhaps someday you will not need to go home, but only wish to. I will make the arrangements. The men were planning to set out sometime next week. I assume you can be ready by then. Of course I can. Thank you, Sidra. Guinevere hugged her joyfully, ignoring the disapproval of the older women. I will come back again very soon, I promise. Just a few weeks with my parents. Time to play with my niece. That's all I need, truly. She was not so blind to the terrified expression Alswitha gave her when she explained where she was going and how long she would be gone, but all the Saxon girl said was, "Let me help you decide what things you will take. I hope you will have good weather for your visit. Alswitha, I'm not leaving forever, just for a little while. Risa will stay with you, and has promised to remain here until I return. They won't let anyone hurt you, and I will hurt you, and Sidra will, well. Alswitha, I can't stand it here any longer." Something that was almost anger crossed Alswitha's face. You can't stand it? Then of course you must go. She turned away quickly and began folding robes and sorting perfumes. But even the set of her spine told Guinevere that she was thinking, how could anyone be so spoiled, so self-centered? Guinevere stood uncertainly, not knowing what to do. She stretched her hand out and spoke softly, begging forgiveness. I will be back very soon. Only give me a little time. Alswitha's shoulders drooped. She took the offered hand and clasped it tightly. She spun around and hugged her, holding her wet cheek against Guinevere's. It's not your fault, she wept. Of course, you must go. That night she told Egfrith about how Guinevere was leaving and how lonely she would be. She was so miserable that she didn't notice the gleam of triumph in his eyes. The next morning his bed was empty. Even the resulting uproar didn't convince Guinevere to stay. The general opinion was that he had tried to escape but had been crushed on the rocks or drowned and washed out to sea. So few of the so few of the Britons could swim that it never occurred to them that anyone was strong enough to enter the sea and survive. If Ælfwine was afraid that they would treat her more harshly because of Ecgfrith's escape, she soon realized that she was wrong. If anything, it improved her position. People felt sorry for her. She was not so threatening now that her brother was not there, glaring sullenly from his corner of the wall. The air was clear, and the wind smelled of damp earth the day they left. Guinevere hated riding pillion behind someone, but she had conceded this point and held tightly to Belenius. She had chosen him to show that she held no ill feeling against him in the manner of the bread game. As she had suspected, no one objected to being her guard of honor to the villa. She kissed everyone goodbye indiscreetly. She was so happy, and she resolutely failed to notice the look in Ælfwine's eyes. As she left, she twisted back to wave. Her last sight was of Giraldus standing behind Ælfwine, who was oddly enough leaning on the shoulder of the raven-haired Alto. Ooh. Chapter 13. Gwynlyn knelt in her garden, plucking minuscule weeds from among the herbs. The earth was cool and moist until under her hands, and the sun warm across her back. Laughter dappled the air as Rihanna chased her daughter Letitia about the courtyard. Gwynlyn raised her face and absorbed the peace of the day, the infant plants in the field and the deep green of the forest blending far off into the mountains. It was a morning called from Eden. The impermanence of it cut into her heart. She sighed and wiped her forehead with a soil-stained hand as she heard Leodegrance approach from the villa. His shadow blocked the sun as he stood over her. Gwynlyn reached out her hand to be helped to her feet. "Where are you going today? Who among our friends has need of you now?" "No one," he grinned. "It seems that I have solved all the problems of our tenants and neighbors." He swept his arm across the view before them. "You see how smoothly the world functions? I have even arranged for a few gentle clouds to touch up the sky a bit. See them floating in from the west, just as ordered?" Gwynlyn stood next to him for some time, watching the world. Gwynlyn stood next to him for some time, watching. The world was indeed beautiful today. Then she turned away from him. "Why is it, then, that I am so sorrowful, so afraid?" The torture she saw in his face shamed her. Shamed her. I see. The torture she saw in his face shamed her. "We have good reason, my dear, to suffer, but while we live, we must search for tranquility at least." "It isn't that. My grief is for our sons, in a part of my bones now, and I almost believe that I would feel something missing if I woke one morning and it was not with me. This is a different feeling. I can't understand it. All our lives we have fought. We have given everything to preserve our way of life. When it was certain that we and all our work would become ruins and ashes, I still believed. I still hoped. Now it seems as if Arthur has won this battle for us. The Saxons are truly being pushed back into their holes along the coast. He has dreams of rebuilding the towns and reinstating central government. All the things we planned. Why, when everything is coming right at last, do I feel the threat of certain doom?" Leodegrance was silent for so long she feared he wouldn't answer. She needed to have an answer, even if it only told her that he didn't know. "I have pondered this for many months," he finally replied. "Yes, I have felt it too, and I believe that I have found an answer, although I hope that I may be proven wrong. It is, as I said before, Rome is dead. A togaed king of the Goths sits on the throne of the emperor. Gaul is in flames and is controlled by Germanic tribes. Britain was always the most removed of the outposts. We preserved a life we only knew about from books and proclamations and the rosy memories of our grandparents. Gwynlyn, our goals were those of the perfect world, a society that never was. Arthur is trying to create a new Rome, but we see what he has to work with. We know the corrupt men who would be senators or proconsuls. They are not Cicero or Pliny. They are only soldiers and badly educated lords with a few acres of land and a dozen or so tenants or slaves. How could they know of the grandeur of the great oration or of the glory of a unified world? They are only impressed by an abundance of hot water. This can't be true, Gwendolyn moaned, although she feared he was right. The world is supposed to be getting better. We are prepared for the millennium when earth and heaven become one, but you can see that we are drifting away from everything that should bring man closer to God. I will not believe that, my love. I have held my faith too long. We are just blinded by our visions so that we do not see the new order. We think the end of Roman life is the end of the world. It is. It's the end of my world. And of mine, I confess that I cannot see how joining hands with barbarians will improve the state of things and the prospect of my grandchildren, living in a land ruled by heathens who don't even read their own language, much less ours, terrifies me. But I can't stop believing that civilized man in some form will eventually triumph, even if no one I have loved will live to see it. There is no reason for my certainty. I know it is foolish, but haven't we learned, my dearest love, that when nothing is left but faith, it is that which we cling to? I find little comfort in your words or in the hope of victory, which none of our blood may see, but I find that somehow I can be strong again. It is a large world, and I suppose we have done little to change it, for good or for ill. But that little we have done in our lives may have been what was needed to keep the night from overwhelming us. Perhaps like you, I cling to that belief because I am growing old and there is little more I can do. Isn't it ridiculous? I always felt like Lavinia, mother of Rome, waiting in regal certainty for Aeneas to arrive. I never feared for you as I did for our children. We were legend, part of the epic. What has it come to? Here we are, an aging man and woman not very well educated, influencing a few acres of land and a few dozen people, and we find we are not able to read the future at all. At the same time, in a semi-ruined house in Chichester, Arthur was explaining to Merlin his plan for a new society. Merlin was listening patiently to the rebirth of the ideas that he had planted 20 years before. As he made appropriate noises, he was really thinking of Arthur and how he had grown and developed over that time. In the past 3 years, Arthur had changed. His body had finally filled out his height, and he was an awe-inspiring figure to his men. Well over 6 feet tall, with flaming red hair and a roaring voice. He had completely mastered the art of claiming obedience not by violence, but through the belief of his fellow men in his authority. The men respected him, even though most of his war leaders were senior to him in years. But it was easy. He was learning to command in time of war, if one continued to win. The next step, much more difficult, was to govern a country in time of peace. Arthur had never lived in a Britain free of fighting, but he had wonderful plans. First, we must reestablish the old governmental offices. We need to appoint local officials and make clear division between the provinces. Then we must rebuild the roads and convince people to move back to the towns. A day's work, Merlin scoffed. For one thing, our population will not fill even a few towns. Too many have died or fled. Arthur waved that problem aside. Never mind, we'll rebuild the population too. There should be little resistance to that suggestion. Besides, he added, once it is known that the old order has returned, those who fled the chaos will return too. Do you believe that those who have spent 2 generations building estates in Armorica will bother to return to the ruins that they left here? You are not looking at this situation clearly. Merlin, Arthur said sternly, you are trying to discourage me, but I have an even better idea, one I didn't get from you. I want to build a new city, a great towering, shining town high on a hilltop, so that travelers approaching will see it long before they arrive, glistening in the sun like the holy city. It will be more beautiful than any spot in the world, and I will call craftsmen artisans, scribes, teachers, even philosophers to live there with me. Among us, we can create a new world where every man can read and learn as he wills. It will be greater than Rome in all its glory, for my city will have a mind and a soul. It will be... Why are you staring at me like that? Merlin brushed his hand over his eyes. It is nothing, Arthur. I was only thinking that perhaps I didn't teach you as well as I should have, or too well, and I was wishing that I was young again before my vision came to me. I was also marveling that you could have such hope for a man with all you have seen of war. I have seen other things, Merlin. You have shown me some of them, and I know you never believed me, but I am certain that my cause is blessed by the Virgin herself, with her face always in my memory. It is not so difficult to wash out the horrors I have seen, the deaths I have witnessed. I do not love to fight. Of all people, you must know that I curse this talent I have for battle. My sword and spear may become plow and pruning hook this moment for all I care. Yes, I know I am not a Marcus Aurelius. I can barely read, and a stylus seems to slip through my fingers when I try to write. But I am the one who is here, and the one who is left to try and salvage what remains of our people. Merlin, why must you always ridicule my plans for the future? Can't you even allow me my dream? The older man leaned back in his chair. He stared at the wall behind Arthur, with its once beautiful fresco, now faded and peeling. Even in his memory, the town had been almost empty. What must it be like, full of people, coming and going in such security that there is no wall about the town, no lock upon the gate. The town even has a theater. Even he could not imagine that. Poor Arthur. What chance did he really have? My dear son, you cannot afford such dreams. If anyone in the land must be hard and cynical, it is you. When you lead an army, they follow you or they die. Every man knows that. But when the army is disbanded, there is no more soldiers. No more fighting units. There is only 1,000 men with 1,000 different ways of looking at things, using all of the emotions that are ignored in war. They will want land of their own and for their children. They will want comfort and security. And those who have served you well will expect preferment, even at the expense of one another. They will not care about philosophy, but they will remember again all the petty feuds and land disputes they have put aside to fight with you. That is what they will want you to do for them. There are days when I almost wish that we could go on fighting forever. For the moment the war ends, there will be such chaos and anarchy. You can't count on dreams to put that in order. Poetry will not amuse men who want power. And the saddest part is that I do believe in you. All my hopes for the past 25 years have been set on you and your dreams. You are the only man alive today who has a chance of uniting Britain and making her live again. But even I can't see the possibility of building a new city, a refuge of the arts, in the midst of this destruction. His gesture encompassed not only the room they sat in, but all the world outside. The men and women out there who were bred to fear had never known a summer without the danger of raids, the threat of total annihilation. They huddled now in the shadows of stone forts, creeping into the fields to plant and reap enough to keep themselves alive one more year. The rough, belching lords and petty tyrants who the people's allegiance won the people's allegiance because they were strong enough to protect them. What would these men say to a consul come to establish Roman law in their holdings? And the Saxons, they were not going to vanish. They were settled in their massive halls of wood. And the people of London had gone so far as to establish trade with the Saxon villages south of them, gold and leather for grain and protection. Would the Saxons submit to Arthur's law? There were just too many changes, too many differences to bring the old ways back, yet Arthur wanted to go even beyond that. He wanted to make a kingdom of philosophers, a perfect realm. Merlin studied his own hands. They had never held a sword or an axe. They had never learned a trade beyond riding, and yet his own life had been hard enough so that they were brown and calloused like any farmers or soldiers. He idly wondered if even he could fit into this ideal society. Could Arthur? There is one other thing, Merlin. Arthur broke into his reverie. I want you to help me with something else. I am growing older. In 2 years, I will be 30, and it is time we should think of my marrying. Merlin started in alarm. He had been hoping to put this talk off, for he had always felt a sense of dread whenever he thought of the matter, although he didn't know why. He tried to assume a jocular attitude. So you have met some local girl who appeals to you. These are a few of the old families. Oh, there are a few of the old families still living around here. Would you like me to speak to her father? Arthur blushed, and his years and self-assurance slid from him. No, Merlin, I have not met her, but I have thought long upon the subject. If I am destined in some way to rule Britain, I must have a wife who is worthy of that even more than I am. Also, if she could bring something, a dowry, which would be a sort of symbol, that is, I have heard of something. She is said to be very... Merlin, you must guess whom I mean. Help me. Merlin guessed. The last thing he wanted to do was help. Do you mean that empty-headed child of my cousin? She is hardly the type I thought you would consider. I don't know what you ever heard of her, but you mustn't believe it all. It is true that she is rather pretty, but hardly worthy of her family. She is spoiled and heedless, with no more feeling than an insect. There isn't a man in this world with luxuries enough to satisfy that one. That isn't what her brothers said of her. And why would Lady Gwendolyn long for her so if she had no heart? Even Lady Sidra praises her. Others tell me that she may be the most beautiful woman in all of Britain, and they say she smiles kindly on everyone regardless of their station. That speaks well of her feelings. I would like at least a chance to meet her. Won't you arrange that much, Merlin? Merlin felt a chill wind at his back. He knew that he must not do this thing. There was something terribly wrong, but he did not know why, and he could think of no excuse that would satisfy Arthur. I think it will be a mistake, but if nothing else will make you happy, I will ask Leodegrance if you can visit Guinevere at Cador. Merlin hoped devoutly that she would have a cold. Thank you. You won't try to prejudice her against me, will you? I know I am clumsy and loud and not well bred, and as she is, but I would give her everything I had and be very kind to her. You know that. Of course I do, you young idiot. Don't you see that I am trying to tell you that I don't believe she would be kind to you? That is my concern. Let me at least meet her. Arthur's jaw was as set now as when he planned his famous strategies of war. Merlin knew there would be no more argument. If that is what you desire, Lord of Britain, that is what shall be done. Okay. And this is, the scene changed again, it looks like, because now we are with Guinevere. We are going to stop this right here. We have been reading Guinevere by Sharan Newman. This is the book that is still for sale, along with the second book of the trilogy, the Chessboard Queen, and the third book of the trilogy, Guinevere Evermore. Anyways, if you like this content, make sure you like this. If you like this content, make sure you like and subscribe and ring the bell so you know when I upload. And if you support me in any way, all that information will be in the description below. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.